Hi, my name is Grace. I'm the Director of Brand and Communications at Wodify. A little bit about me. I do have a background in graphic design, so I spent the first 10 years or so of my career working at an ad agency in Minneapolis. Around 2015, I actually found myself in the middle of the boutique fitness boom in Minneapolis. So a handful of really cool concepts started opening up in my neighborhood. People were kind of shifting from the big box gyms to the boutique style gyms, and everyone was kind of falling in love with that concept. I fell in love with this really amazing gym called Alchemy. They had just opened their flagship location in my neighborhood, combined yoga, strength, and conditioning into one workout. So the owners had opened the first CrossFit gyms in Minneapolis, and they had managed Core Power Studios and kind of merged those two concepts together to create this really amazing community, invigorating concept that was just very addicting at the time. So I quit my cushy agency job and went all in with the founders of Alchemy. Spent 7 years with them, launched 9 studios in 2 markets, survived a global pandemic, built a digital program, learned a lot, made a lot of mistakes along the way. I spent the first couple of years at Alchemy launching studios and doing all things marketing, but then when the pandemic hit, overnight our leadership team shrunk from 6 full-time employees down to 2. So I found myself with the CEO figuring out how to run operations for 9 studios. And I dove headfirst into that, figuring it out over the next 4 years with him. And the pandemic was really interesting because it gave us this unique opportunity to really reevaluate our team structure, figure out what was working, what wasn't working, even pre-pandemic, and then make changes and optimize the business for the better. And so, again, learned a lot, made a lot of mistakes, iterated on things, and learned lessons on how to build a brand for a fast growth company, but also how to build a team at the same time. And so I took all those lessons from Alchemy and I use them today at Wodify as well. So I'm part of a super lean and nimble marketing team here at Wodify. And we use these foundational tools to continue to build our team, optimize it, and make sure that we're growing with strength and success. So I'm excited to share more about those with you guys today.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Mark Fisher. For those who are not familiar with my background, I am I guess, 20 plus here, fitness professional, 15-year owner of various gyms, and most recently, a coach, consultant, and speaker, largely full time, though I do still own a gym. So a little bit more details there. I opened up my first gym at the end of 2011, a very unusual, quirky gym called Mark Fisher Fitness. That if you've heard of me, it's likely that's how you've heard of me. In brief, if you haven't, that gym was designed for members of New York City's Broadway community. So the brand was very unusual. We called them our clients ninjas, called the mascot the unicorn. And it was amazing. We had an amazing time, ran that business for 13 years. The number that is often thrown around, just to give you like some context, the gym did very well. So we grossed 34 million during the 13 years I ran it. About a year and a half ago, I wound up selling that gym to focus on my current business, Business for Unicorns, where I just think about and do gym business stuff all day long. So we've had the fortune to work with several hundred gym owners all over the world. And what I do every day is like stuff like this, is thinking like, how do we get gym owners more leads, more sales, do a better job finding and taking care of their team, creating systems, taking great care of the clients. The last thing that I'll say that is relevant to today's conversation is I still own a gym. So I own a gym in New Jersey. It is a small group personal training franchise. So that gym, unlike Mark Fisher Fitness, the beautiful behemoth that it was, that gym is a little bit more similar to the gyms that many of you might run. So it's a lighter, a smaller footprint, leaner staff, and that is relevant to today's conversation because, yeah, I've learned a lot of things going well and things going very hard when it comes to leading other people. And in practice, how I utilize those skills today are running this gym in New Jersey with the help of an amazing fitness director. And I'm still in it, right? So that means that things like, last week we had a part-timer leave with virtually no notice. So a lot of the things I'll be talking about today are not things that, I was doing 10 years ago. They're things that I'm still actively doing as I look to support our fitness director in that facility. So I think that's good context for me for today.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. We're super excited to collaborate with you on this for sure. So, okay, so quick kind of just recap about why we're here and what we're talking about. You're likely here because you opened a gym because you love coaching, community, transformation, all the things. And you might have seen the name of this webinar and thought to yourself, wait, am I the problem? Am I actually what's standing in between my gym and the next level? And so Mark and I connected and we came up with this topic because it was so relevant to both him and I over the years. And we wanted to see if there was ways to support you if you're feeling like this. So maybe you're the bottleneck. Maybe every decision has to funnel through you and people are always waiting on you. Like your programming's always behind, so your coaches can't prep, or you forgot to pay the laundry bill, so the towels aren't ready. Maybe you made a bad hire and you thought you needed a GM, so you quickly hired one and it's just not going well. You have unmet expectations on both sides. Maybe you have staff, but things just still aren't getting done and nobody knows who owns what. And lastly, maybe you're just exhausted, you're overwhelmed, and you need something to change because you can't do this any longer. I think both Mark and I have felt a lot of those things in our history. And so I'm excited to talk to you, let you know you're not alone, and hopefully give you some tools to help you take things to the next level. So we're just going to both share a little bit about our team building stories really quick here, just to give you a little bit more background on things that may have gone well or not gone well for us before we kind of dive into a little bit more of the details. So as I mentioned, I started working with Alchemy when it was like lightning in a bottle style growth. We had aggressive growth plans. We had hundreds and hundreds of members at every studio, 300 to 500 at each location. And so we hired full-time GMs at each location, and that worked well for a while until it didn't. And we started feeling understaffed as we continued to expand to more and more studios. So we kept hiring more and more roles at the studio level. So by the time it was December of 2017, we had this accountability chart that had 5 full-time employees at one studio. So this shows 5 positions at one studio with only 300 members. And that was on top of having part-time staff and for coaching and front desk as well. And the root cause of having all of these positions was that our general manager position wasn't meeting the expectations that we needed. And so instead of trying to fix the GM role, we kept adding these band-aid solutions like, oh, the GM isn't good at selling retail. Let's hire someone to do that. They don't know how to coach coaches. Let's hire someone to do that. And we ended up with this situation where we had this big, beautiful, fun team, but it wasn't sustainable. We had too many people, overhead was too high, and the road to financial freedom was like not in sight. And so we took a step back, we reevaluated from the top to the bottom, like what was wrong with the roles that we currently had. And slowly over time, in a lot of iterations, we didn't get there overnight, but we ended up back down to having one general manager at each location that was super high performing and doing the job right. And we did that by setting clear expectations, building the role out with what actually needed to be done, and then hiring the right people for the right seat. So we ended up with general manager at every location, part-time support, which was much more sustainable and helped studios become profitable. So again, excited to kind of walk through some of these tools I use to do this in a little bit more detail.
Yeah, for my part, I will tell a very short story that I will, I should acknowledge in advance, sort of a heavy story, but you'll see, for those of you looking at the slides, there is a picture of me there. I am outside BKK Social Club in Bangkok. Again, you know me for gym stuff. Probably the second thing you'll know about me is I'm forever searching the world for the next great martini. This is one of the world's best cocktail bars. And if you look, you can sort of see in this picture, I'm a little bit out of sorts, a little bit forlorn. So a little bit of context for this picture. I am flying to see my friends for a once in a lifetime vacation. We're doing the islands in Thailand and Bangkok, and I'm going to go on to Singapore. And the plane is about to land in Dubai. And I pick up my phone, I get on the Wi-Fi, and I have 4 of my siblings just texted me the words, text me. And my wife texted me, baby, are you getting Wi-Fi on the plane? So as you might imagine, I come to find out, unfortunately, that my father passed away while I was in the air. So this was a bit of a scramble. And here's how this relates to today's conversation. Okay. That time was very hard for me. Okay. As you might imagine. Right. And the reality is the nature of a 10-year, a 20-year period, if we're going to own our gyms for a long time, things are going to happen. Now, by all means, yes, I want you to make great money. I want you to have freedom to just go on vacations. Like this was awesome. I was able to go on vacation, have teams be able to run the gym. But it is also true that sometimes life, you need like margin of emotional bandwidth because like things are going to happen, and I'm not trying to be like overly dark here. I just want to acknowledge that for a gym to be sustainable, for it to be humane, we need to have other people that are able to occasionally mind the show, right? And I didn't go like totally AWOL here, but I mean, I had a couple weeks where I was not very useful. And at this time, I owned three businesses. So I'm very, very grateful, not only for the systems we put in place, but definitely the people that were able to give me space and time to breathe. And my wish for you is yes, not only to go on vacation, not only to make more money, but have enough support that if there's a situation where you have weeks at a time where you're not really able to give much focus, you have other people that are appropriately taken care of, supported, and compensated to pick up the ball and run with it and give you the breathing room that I think we all need in a long life that hopefully we'll all live. So that's my story. And yeah, we can kick into it.
Thanks for sharing that, Mark. Yeah. All right. So do you want to kick us off with the trainer to CEO shift?
Yes. Okay. So let's talk about the mindset shift that makes everything possible. So we can go to the next slide here. This is what, to my mind, I see is the biggest distinction between successful trainers and how they shift into successful business owners. So the trainer is going to spend time to save money, right? The trainer is going to, generally speaking, think like, oh, I can just do this myself. This way I don't need to spend money on it. But a CEO is going to invest money to buy time. Right now, listen, I know we're not running multi-billion dollar international conglomerates, but if you think about this, if someone is a CEO, right, a billionaire CEO, okay, things that they're probably not doing for themselves include cooking for themselves, doing their laundry, handling their scheduling, handling their meetings, right? They usually don't drive themselves. And again, I'm not trying to suggest we get too big for our britches here. I just want to make the point that the biggest shift we can make when we move from trainer to a business owner is we want to invest the money to buy back time, in part because once we have that time, we can usually use it on tasks, responsibilities, things that more profoundly impact the business's success. So if we go to the next slide, we'll help you think a little bit more about this. This is what we call the gym owner task hierarchy. Okay. So this is the motto we use at Business for Unicorns when we're helping analyze how gym owners are spending their time. So at the very bottom, the things that tend to be most tedious, but also most affordable to delegate or outsource, if you look at the hourly cost to have someone else handle, are going to be manual work and administrative knowledge work. Okay. And the main distinction there is manual work is going to be things in the facility. This might be cleaning the toilets, right? It might be folding laundry. It might be unboxing inventory of any kind of retail products that have arrived, because there's some things that need to be done in the space. And administrative knowledge work is largely defined by things that you can do on a computer. So this might be updating a member's membership. This might be something like potentially dealing with some sort of bill pay. Then when you get to tier three, okay, this is an important distinction because a lot of you are in different places. Okay, I want to own a lot of you in different places in your career. And if you are on the floor a lot, okay, in the beginning, sometimes it actually makes more sense to outsource these administrative tasks, these manual tasks, because generally speaking, fulfilling services is more valuable, right? It's more valuable for your client's experience. It's also a little bit more expensive because frankly, training sessions on the floor, like that's the whole game. So the hourly rate there, you're typically gonna need to pay the amount of effort and energy and love and care you need to pour into somebody doing that is going to generally be higher than somebody to clean the facility. Okay. But we don't stop there. Above tier three, when you get up to tier two, now we are moving, we're spending our time on things that are going to drive the business, right? So these are things that are going to generate leads, could be following up with leads, it could be doing sales conversations. And typically speaking, this is going to be more expensive. It's going to arguably require a little bit more skill. So there does come a point where now we need to start to outsource the training itself so we have more time to work on the business building activity. And then I would claim that tier one, the most important thing you can do, which arguably you're doing right now, is how do we develop the systems and develop the team so they can do all four of the other tiers, right? Because particularly as the business progresses, you will spend more and more of your time at a higher level, generally for a typical gym, even a multi-unit gym. And these days I have a number of clients that are now scaling to 5, 10 locations plus. The reality is the owner, you're still responsible for the strategy. And even if you are not doing the things, you're responsible, like Grace mentioned before, as an example, for the performance of the unit level GMs, okay? So this is an imperfect model, but it's a useful way to think about this. If we go to the next slide, I'd love to take a second. I'd love for you to just jot down. I'd really love for you to like actually do this. Make a list if you would. What are the tasks that you do every day and every week? Okay, so we'll do this pretty quickly. Obviously, I can't see you in your home. I don't have a camera there, so I don't know if you're doing it, but I think this will be more useful if you do it. What are the things that you do every day and every week? So, for example, a lot of you probably on the call are probably training sessions on a weekly basis. Great, right? Maybe you are, in fact, doing things in your booking and billing platform. Maybe some of the manual tasks I mentioned. Maybe you're doing opening, closing. Maybe you're handling some of the cleaning, right? And then maybe you're already starting to do some of the marketing stuff, right? Depending on your current systems and strategies there. This might be following up with leads. This might be reaching out to local business partners. This might be overseeing a vendor that is running meta ads for you. And depending on where you're at, you might spend some of that time, and Grace and I'll talk about this more in a moment, maybe in like a leadership meeting, doing some strategy stuff. Maybe you're doing one-on-ones with some of your team members. Maybe you're doing trainings to help improve your team's performance. So once you have this list, and it doesn't need to be perfect, but just for the sake of this exploration, if we go on the next slide, we can now assess for each of the tasks you listed that you do every day and every week, you can begin to look and actually put some numbers on this. What is the value of that task to the business? So crudely speaking, it's going to map to that 5-tier hierarchy that we showed 2 slides ago. Because generally speaking, yeah, things like manual work, right? It's usually not that expensive to have someone do it. It can quite literally be manual pay. And in fact, or I'm sorry, minimum wage. Now, we're going to come back to in a little bit how you might think about actually having some of these other people handle these tasks for you and who you might choose. But for now, I think the more robust version of this, which I would encourage you to do after you haven't done recently, is do a full-time audit, right? So we just did it very quickly, but if you list all the things that you do, you can go task by task, item by item, and assess, okay, how much would it cost me realistically to have someone else handle, right? And then importantly, this is the thing that I think is often missed, right? This is a point I really want to hammer here because, time audit is not revolutionary in itself. But I think you should also assess how much energy do you get or do you lose by doing that item? Because if nothing else, a big takeaway I'd like you to take from this section before we move on is if there's something that is tedious, that you dislike, it is boring, it takes energy away from you, it makes you sad to have to go into the gym, and it is very cheap to outsource, that's probably the first thing we want to work on, okay? Because we could, have a very complicated conversation based on your situation of like what goes where. But if nothing else, you want to write down the action step. If there's something you're doing every day, every week that you do not like doing, that is not that complicated, wouldn't be that expensive to outsource. I close where I began. Trainers try to save time by spending, or the trainer try to save money by spending time. I'd invite you to think more like a business owner and be willing to spend some money to buy back that time, which you can put to more useful pursuits.
Yeah, and somebody is going to be better at it than you. That thing that you hate doing every day, that's tedious, that like does not bring you joy, someone's going to be
Hmm.
better at it, faster
Hmm.
at it, and you really got to think sometimes about who might be, better to do those
That's
things.
right.
Don't
And
be.
if I can also, yeah, relate to that, let me just make one other obvious point. You'll notice two of the options on there are things like chasing failed payments or manual class scheduling, right? So presumably, there might be some of you watching this that where you're at in your journey, right? I know some people here are opening up a gym soon, maybe don't have a booking billing platform. And I would just say that, there are certain companies you can hire that have these actual tech products, these software products that will make your life infinitely better because you don't have to pay somebody else to do it now. You can just have a software like Wodify handle those things on your behalf.
Yep, very, very good point, Mark. Okay, great. So we're going to move on to talking about getting the right people in the right seats. I'm going to share two foundational tools that are going to help you achieve this. So when I worked with Alchemy, we worked on an operating system called EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. These tools are derived from that. So if these resonate with you, something you might want to check out further for sure. So before you hire your first or your next seat, this is really the foundational work that matters more than it might seem. If you have a team right now, that's great. And as you grow, things might start to bubble up. So these tools can be useful to even run through with the team that you currently have. And if you feel like you've got a people problem, these tools are going to help you identify what's actually going on and why, and help you take action. And if you're a one-person shop, get the clarity you need with these foundational tools before you open up that job listing, or you begin outsourcing things. And so we've got templates for all of this. Don't worry about trying to take too many notes. You'll get all these in your inbox right after this concludes. So the first tool is our accountability chart. And before we take a look at what this looks like and how to use it, I want to go through three super simple rules for building your accountability chart. The first one is structure first, names second. So you want to design the seats on your accountability chart that your gym needs, starting from scratch. Then put the names in it. This chart is a picture of your business. It's not a picture of the people in your business, if that makes sense. So you also don't want to build seats for people. If a role only exists because that loyal person exists, you're doing them a favor and you're not building the seat correctly. And that's work that can become very, very difficult to undo if you start with it. And then the last one is one seat, one name. A person can hold multiple seats, and spoiler alert, you're probably sitting in a lot of seats. But every single seat can only have one owner. If it has two owners, that means nobody's in charge. So this is an example of what your accountability chart might look like. Everybody's business is different, but this is a starting point for you as a gym owner. So you're going to start with your three major functions: marketing and sales, operations, and finance. You can then absolutely add additional seats to cover things that your unique business needs. So at Alchemy, for instance, we always had a product seat because writing our own programming and running coaches training and seminars was a core part of our business model, and that didn't belong to any other seat. So that was always on our accountability chart. So you can feel free to customize this based off of your needs. Start by putting yourself at the top as the visionary. So you own big ideas, growth, culture. All of the seats below you are the functional seats that are going to help you execute your business on a day-to-day. For all the seats below you as the CEO, you're going to want to define 3 to 5 roles and responsibilities that this seat does. These are a handful of things that each seat owns that has no overlap or sharing between the different roles. Then you're going to start filling them out. So again, your name is could be like literally in every seat. That's okay. And you might have someone on your team that is currently sitting in the operations role, maybe a GM. Great, put their name in there. And you also might find that you have a seat that is completely open. So maybe nobody really owns sales and marketing right now. Maybe you're sometimes posting to social, your GM will call somebody to follow up if they've got time. That's not clear ownership. And so that seat is open until we decide who is actually accountable for those roles and responsibilities. So take some time after this webinar, build your accountability charts, and really think through what your business needs to run and who is currently sitting in these seats. Once your chart is done, you're going to have every single function laid out, mapped out, and then we're going to talk about how to get and make sure that the right people are in the right seats, which is tool number 2. So this is our people analyzer. It's a simple tool to help you answer sometimes a difficult question. Is this the right person in the right seat? And again, if you have a full-time staff right now, great, evaluate them as they sit today. If you're hiring, you can run your top candidates through these tools before you make an offer. If you're thinking about promoting, you can also use this as a pressure test before making any decisions. So this is the right person half of the tool, and we're going to measure your team against your core values. So you're going to start by having your team on the left side and your core values across the top. So in this example, the core values are all in, coach the person, raise the bar, team over ego. Those are going to be unique to your business. And what you're going to do is rate each person on your team against the core values. A plus meaning that they consistently live that core value every single day. A plus minus means that most of the time they live that core value. And a minus means that they don't. They're not living that core value. They're not a good example of it. You're going to want to go with your gut. So your first instinct is usually right. Like, don't overthink this. Just quick plus, plus, minus, minus, go down the chart. It should take 10 seconds. And then you're going to want to set the bar. So each business is going to have a unique bar. What is acceptable to you to be on your team? Oftentimes it's mostly pluses, no minuses. That's a great bar to set. So in this example, you can see that Jordan is above the bar. He is living out our core values every single day. He's got pluses across the board. Then you can see Sam is on the bar. So we said in this example, you can have a plus minus on our team. That's acceptable. And that's great. You're a good fit. So Sam's on the bar, no issues there. Alex has a minus under coach the person. So that is a great opportunity to have a conversation with Alex and give them the opportunity to raise up to be on that bar. And when you have that conversation, you know what you're addressing. You know that Alex is not showing up and living that specific value of coach the person. Here's example X, Y, and Z. Here's how you think they can grow to develop into that role so that they are actually meeting those core values. And then we've got Riley down here on the bottom. So Riley is below the bar. Plus minuses across the board and even a minus on the raise the bar. This person is just probably not a great fit for your business, and that's okay. They're probably going to be happier elsewhere as well. And this is probably a time when you're going to have a conversation about making a change for this person in your organization. So the key point here is that a minus does not automatically mean you're firing somebody. It gives you a great tool to have a conversation to help elevate that person to meet the standards of your business. And it just is a great way to make sure that everybody on your team understands your core values and is living them every single day. Okay, so part one was right person. Part two of this is right seat. Does this person fit in the specific seat that they're currently in? We're going to rate each person in your organization on gets it, wants it, and has capacity for it. And each of these, you're saying yes or no. There are no maybes, no in between. So do they get it? Do they truly understand the seat, the systems, the pace, how it connects to the rest of your business? So for example, you might have this really great coach, but they don't get the GM seat. They don't understand the admin follow-up, the pace of it. They don't understand how to be accountable to numbers. That's okay if they stay in their coach seat, but it's probably not okay if they're trying to move to a GM role. Do they want it? Do they genuinely want the seat, not the title or the raise? They really need to understand like what the job entails and be fired up to do it. You can't want it for them. And then do they have the capacity, the time, the skills, the mental, the emotional bandwidth to do it? Sometimes the capacity can kind of be a training gap. Like you might need to give them more tools and resources to execute their job, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes they just don't have the bandwidth to be able to do it because of X, Y, and Z, and that's okay. So again, this must be 3 out of 3. 2 yeses is not enough. If you have something like 2 yeses, that's how you end up doing things like I explained early in the introduction, where we were having tension with the GM role. You need to have 3 yeses on this to make sure it's the right seat for that person. So that can often be, the unlock here. So instead of was it a bad hire? Ask, was it the wrong seat? Sometimes moving people into the right seat in your organization is going to save your relationship. It's going to save your payroll and a lot of other things. Okay, so you run everybody through those 2 kind of tests, and they're going to end up in one of these 4 buckets, which is great. So if it's the right person in the right seat, keep them, invest in them, protect them at all costs. Don't bury them in other people's work. Like these are the people that you want to keep in your organization. If it's the right person, wrong seat, they share your values. Maybe they're just miscast. This is a great opportunity to move them and not lose them. So you might have a struggling GM who would be better in a product seat, or maybe even they should just step down and do more coaching hours because that's what makes them happy and has them thriving. Instead of doing all the admin of GM, they could be your full-time coach. Wrong person, right seat. This is a really hard one, right? So this is probably the hardest one on the board. These are people who hit their numbers. Your community loves them. Their classes are full. But something in your gut is telling you they are eroding your core values every single day. And that's not okay. If you keep them around and you ignore that just because they're performing, they are going to be toxic to your environment. And it's going to tell people on your team who are living up to your core values that they're optional, and that's not okay. And then wrong person, wrong seat. This is really an opportunity to just probably part ways. They're going to thrive somewhere else. Your business is going to thrive without them. And it can be a hard decision to make, but it's probably the right one. All right, Mark.
Okay. All right. So now that we have some clarity on, what we're looking to do, we now need to decide, how do we find this person, right? How do we make decisions over who is going to sort of either take over some of these tasks or in some situations come on to the organization in a new role? Not a secret here. I think worth saying out loud, as somebody that does nothing but talk to gym owners all day long, both my clients and my friends, I can tell you this does seem to be the biggest constraint of the entire industry. I think you can get money, you can find spaces, understand business models. There's so many things that you can solve. This is hard. So I want to give you some thoughts on how we might make the best possible decisions on who we bring on and then what we might do to help them perform at a high level. So you'll see here, there are To my mind, I mean, a few different options here when you're looking to outsource. Okay. So before we go right to, and we'll talk about this in a minute, before we go right to making a full-time hire, sometimes if you go back to that audit we did a few slides ago, you can actually look for fractional help and just take even pieces of what you do right now and have someone else run with it for you. And this is very important. It can be quite impactful because as a gym owner, you tend to be time poor, right? So if you're only going to have so many hours per week, even if you're single and don't have a family and kids, that you can work on the business. So in some situations, if you can immediately outsource even 5 hours of lower level work, even 3 hours, that can make a big deal if that time can be replaced with higher level activities like things that grow the business. So, as an example, depending on what it is you're looking to hire, obviously one opportunity is existing staff. So, if you already have a team, if you have trainers that want a few more hours, and maybe this is paid hourly or via stipend, if you have somebody that's part time and just wants more opportunity to work with the business, existing staff is an opportunity. And in the event, this isn't always the case for our kind of business, but if you happen to have, let's say, a trainer that on salary, right? And they have a little bit more bandwidth and a little more breathing room. That's obviously a great opportunity. We can sometimes barter with clients. My only gentle caution there is you still need to run an assessment and like kind of a job search, even with the bartering of clients. I think particularly what I've noticed is sometimes gyms can fall into the habit of hiring the CPA who happens to be there. That's a friendly client that may or may not be the right CPA for that business is one very specific example. But I think bartering with the clients, particularly if you have a front desk, that can be a thing that can be very impactful because you can do the math, even if you pay them out minimum wage, where it's very valuable for you as the business and actually it's a good financial value for them. Now, these next two buckets I put together, but I think they're distinct. You can have, I think, virtual assistants and remote executive assistants. And here's the way I think about it. A virtual assistant is usually an offshore, very low hourly rate or low monthly rate for someone that's willing to do a lot of work. But given the fact that it's a virtual assistant, it is non-correct to say that typically speaking, they're gonna require more oversight. They're not going to be as quote unquote batteries included, which means they won't always be as resourceful. You're going to have to really train them on things. You have to help them develop the SOPs. And while it is always true that we always have to inspect what we expect, if somebody is, I don't want to say lower level, I don't mean this in a derogatory way, but if somebody's a little less sophisticated, you're just going to have to do more work to oversee stuff. My own experience is we've worked with VAs for years across all of my businesses. And, in practice, like things are just going to get messed up sometimes, right? So we can't just assume, oh, I gave it to them. I never need to like look at it again. It's always going to go perfect. A remote executive assistant, on the other hand, in my way of thinking about it, would refer to somebody that you hire who is higher level that you're paying a higher hourly rate, right? So they may or may not be domestic. I, for instance, found a executive assistant that I work with through a company called Freedom Makers that works with spouses of active military personnel. Now, downside there, you're going to pay a lot more in the hourly rate. The plus side is they're going to be fractional in many cases, actually to the minute, and they're just going to come in more with, again, what I would call batteries included. So what does this mean? Well, it means that if you have a good executive assistant, you might be able to say like, hey, I need you to research and figure out how we can find some different solutions for health insurance. Or, hey, I need you to just take a couple calls for me and vet for me. Give me 5 solutions for potential bookkeepers. We're thinking about changing out vendors, and I'd love you to take the first calls and tell me what you think. Or we had a pipe break in the gym. I'd love for you to arrange with the insurance company to see what we need to do about getting reimbursed for it. Okay. So again, time and place for both of them, they're very different. I would say that I would just caution you that the sticker shock of the remote executive assistant is sometimes daunting. I'm lucky I live in New York City, right? So everything feels cheap to me. But if that's the case for you, I would just make the point that sometimes the actual output you get for somebody that's a little bit more sophisticated and just has more work experience might be worth considering. And then finally, some situations, sometimes, yeah, you just need to hire a full new team member, right? Maybe we need to hire another coach. Maybe we're bringing somebody on to function as our number 2, to function as a GM. So let me give you some thoughts now about what that might look like. So we need to make the best hire we can. Here is my own observation. This is a sad experience for me. I think this is true. I think if you get very good at hiring, if you get very, very good at hiring and you're lucky, you're still going to get it wrong sometimes. Okay. So this is the nature of the beast. It's the hardest part, like businesses like ours. You always hear, hire slow and fire fast. And That's all well and good. But if you only have, 2, 3 full-time employees and you desperately need someone to come on, and if they don't work out, you have to jump in and now add 20 sessions with hours you don't really have in your schedule. That's brutal. But nonetheless, it is true that there's always going to be an element of risk here. However, if we follow a good hiring system and a good onboarding system, which we'll talk about in a moment, we're much more likely to get better results. So there's a lot I could say about this, right? So I think our playbook in Business for Unicorns, our hiring system, is I think like 14 pieces maybe, but I just want to give a couple of like very specific tactics of things I would suggest looping into whatever system you use when you're looking to make a hire for a full-time staff. First of all, the job ad matters, right? So we want to sell the opportunity just like you would on a sales page. So we need a big fat headline. A go-to resource for a lot of gyms at the time of this webinar is going to be paid Indeed ads. There's probably like 13 other things you could do, and you should probably do all of them. But if you're blasting out your job description far and wide, we need a compelling headline that's like benefit rich. Usually, but not always. Maybe if you have a number that you can put out there that's going to attract eyeballs, and then you want to sell them on the opportunity. You want to get them excited about the coming into your business. Okay. Second, the phone screen. I am a big fan of taking as many calls as you can. And again, I'm not just the president of Hair Club for Men. I'm also a client, if anyone is old enough to remember that reference, which is to say, I just did this. So like last week, again, we lost our part-timer. So fired up all the resources, all the Indeed ads. And in my suggestion is, generally speaking, because hiring being what it is in most markets, I'd rather just do more phone calls, because for the most part, I can get you up to speed on a lot of the technical elements, but I need you to be enough. You have to be compelling enough, have enough riz, as the kids say, that a wide variety of people that can afford our service are going to find some connection with you. Because remember, your clients are always asking themselves, and they look at your trainers, two things. Are they warm? Do I like them? Do I like me? And two, are they competent? Again, the competent piece you can train up a little bit easier. If the warmth isn't there, we might have some issues. And I find that in this 5-minute phone call, I can quickly get a sense of their vibe. Are they communicative? Do they speak well enough? And importantly, write this one down. This important one is going to save you a lot of grief. I'm learning this on the hard way. I'm going to reconfirm the hourly rate. I'm going to reconfirm the location, and I'm going to reconfirm the hard schedule requirements of which I cannot work around, because it is in earlier days, it was constantly shocking to me. I'd get to the job offer and suddenly understand the person wants a lot more money and they can't physically get to the facility on a regular basis, and they can only work on Tuesdays between 9 a.m. and 12 p.m. Next, I like to send people to group interviews. So this is optimally done in person, but you can do it on video. I run my gym remotely now, so often it's with myself and my general manager. And there's two things I like about this. First of all, it's efficient because we can talk to 2 to 4 people at a time for this next step of the process. And second of all, I actually like the opportunity to sort of see them engage with the other potential candidates. Next, I want them to come in and take a workout, because I think there's a lot you can learn about them as a client. And if you have, for instance, another staff member, they're able to train up the candidate coming in. You can find out a lot of stuff, right, about how do they engage with the other clients? How do they, do they introduce themselves to their coach? Importantly, how do they take feedback, right? If the coach gives them technical feedback, do they receive it warmly, or do they give attitude? I think that can often be illustrative of how they'll behave in the world. And then finally, if there's one thing you take away, okay, because we're talking about 7 things here. If there's one thing to write down, if you're not doing it, is we need to have some kind of stress test where you put the candidate in some situation that approximates the types of environments they'll be in their actual job. Intentionally, when I do this, I'm always very clear. Look, I'm not baking this out fully for you. Okay, I'm intentional. I just want to see how you do on your feed. I want to see how they behave under stress, and that might mean asking them to prepare a mock workout and not telling them much more besides that. Or I'm going to give you this sales role play. I'm going to give you the script, but I'm not going to give you time to work on it. I'm doing that on purpose. We're going to role play some sales calls to see how you do. Or maybe you give them some project they're going to do if you need them to be a GM or an administrative support role. And then we see how they do by actually doing some work. From there, we're going to move into a one-on-one interview. I tend to do I like these to be like 60 minutes. I really want to spend time with a person. My favorite suggestion there, micro pro tip, I'll give you 2. The first is ask about specific times in the past. So behavioral-based questions. Tell me about a time in the past when you had a conflict with a boss or a supervisor. I'd love to know, what was the situation? What actions did you take to fix the situation? And what was the outcome? And the reason this matters is whenever you talk about hypotheticals, people be like, oh, well, if I did have a thorny issue with a client, well, surely I would do this. Whereas you tend to garner slightly more honest responses when you're asking questions about specific times in the past. And of note, previously, Grace showed you some of these values that we're looking to assess for. I would invite you to create some questions around each of the specific values that matter to you in your business and ask about a time in the past when they would have had an opportunity naturally to display those values. My second suggestion leads into the reference check, which is start the conversation, an attribution to top grading or the who method of hiring. We want to start this final conversation by confirming, hey, I just want to let you know, I'll be calling your references pretty much right after this. We're moving quickly to make a hire. Just want to confirm this is Billy's number. Okay, this one. So if I call him this afternoon, because I'm going to ask him about some of the things we talked about today, so you're sure I can get in touch with him? Great. Then typically I will tend to start, my first question will usually be like, well, when I ask Billy how dependable you were as a coworker on a scale of 1 to 10, what do you think Billy would say? And then usually I'm going to ask Billy a version of that question. So my last sort of tactic for you here is when you do these reference calls, which you should do, I highly recommend, instead of asking the owner in our highly litigious society for a candid critical assessment of the team member, I will often couch it by asking them, so I know that you think that, Mrs. Rossini is a great trainer. I know that, she's amazing. But hypothetically speaking, if Mrs. Rossini's coworkers would identify one thing that Mrs. Rossini could have done differently to be even better coworker, what do you think they would say? Right? The implication being like, well, of course, you wouldn't have anything negative to say, potentially opened up to litigation, former manager, but you might be a little bit more honest when you're saying, well, I think her coworkers might say X. Okay. So again, thank you I just want to pause and say, as I'm going quicker, there's a lot I could say about this. We're going to keep moving on, but hopefully those are some things you can integrate in your current hiring process.
I love the stress test. Honestly, it's like people change so dramatically when they're under
Yeah.
stress. And if you don't know
Yeah.
that, how they're going to react before you hire, it can be crazy. And then you're 90 days in, they're finally
Oh
under
boy.
stress and you see it and it can be a total game
Yeah.
changer. So
Yeah.
I agree. That's the one
Yeah.
takeaway.
Yeah, and Grace and I were talking about this beforehand. I mean, it is worth acknowledging that, to some extent, it's kind of like a relationship, right? You're not usually going to see the real issues till you're 3 months, 12 months in the beginning. You're just like, watching Netflix and having intimate time. And then a year and you're like, wait a minute, you leave your socks on the ground or whatever sort of the issue is. Um, and obviously people are going to be on their best behaviors. So, while it's not a complete panacea, I really would, yeah, double down and encourage you to, and you can be humane about this. You can be transparent. You want to see when they're in a stressful situation, like how they behave. Because yeah, it's one thing to, everybody is really delightful to be around at the all-inclusive drinking pina colada, but unfortunately life holds many challenges for us. Okay. So let's talk about, we found the person. This is amazing. Let's talk about setting them up to succeed. So here's the good news. I'm gonna talk this pretty quickly, okay? The reality is for gyms, even if you're hiring a full-time coach, and that doesn't always happen, sometimes you're hiring them part-time first, okay? In practice, you have a finite number of hours. You probably need to spend at least 20 hours, and you probably don't have more than 80. And you're doing that likely over 1 to 2 weeks, or maybe 4 weeks if they're doing this part-time, maybe they're working through another position. So you start by clarifying how many hours do we have? Okay. Because remember, we got to get this, set the expectations, set them up for success by properly training them. Once we know how many hours, then we need to understand what are the buckets that they need. Okay. So think about it's like you're chopping up a pie, right? So hypothetically, if you got a trainer, odds are probably 70 to 80, maybe even 90% of that pie is going to be focusing on training sessions and classes. And we'll talk in a moment about what you actually do with that time. But it's important to note there's some other things they need to do too, right? And this might be obvious for some of you, but it took me longer than I care to admit to get this through my thick skull. But you'll need some time for HR and paperwork, setting up their direct deposit, getting them set up if you offer health insurance, helping them understand sick leave in your state, et cetera, et cetera. And then also the tech IT training. Again, particularly some trainers, sometimes they're not always the most tech forward. So you might need to plan in some training sessions to make sure they properly know how to use the parts of Wodify that they actually are going to need to know how to use. And then, of course, if they're playing any role in sales, and maybe even if a trainer, you're asking them to be part of referral asks, that might be its own bucket. Okay, so I'm not offering that prescriptive, but just suggesting how you think about this. And then now you know the hours. Now you know the buckets. Now you need to figure out, okay, how am I splitting up those hours, right? So again, using the example of what this might look like for training in your 20, 40, 80 hours, perhaps you give them some independent study of learning materials. Maybe you have them watch some either videos you've created, maybe you have resources of maybe either trainer certifications or resources for program design or the technical coaching standards of your facility that they can review on their own. You'll have some real-time classroom style training. This is effective but expensive in time and energy, where you or potentially a general manager or fitness director are working one-on-one with them for 1 to 3 hour sessions and actually in real time working through the things that they need to know for whatever your standard operating procedures and systems are, right? In my world, I'm usually thinking we have like customer service standards, like greet the clients by name when they walk in the door. And then we have technical coaching standards. In your facility, where do the feet go if they're doing a trap bar deadlift in relation to the hips and the shoulders, right? Just hilarious. It was a source of a lot of debate at Mark Fisher Fitness. Okay. So then you have them doing the thing, right? So you have the outside training, the classroom training, and then a lot of it for training particularly, you can probably figure out, okay, how many sessions do they need to like shadow or audit, right? How many sessions you can require them to sit there with a notepad for the systems and understand how this happens in your facility? How many sessions do you want them to do alongside a team member where they're both essentially doing whatever the service is? So particularly if you have a group model, this would be pretty normal. You want some sessions where the current team member, somebody already knows how to do it, or maybe you, is doing it with this other person. So they're having support. And then the third and final piece is as you move to sort of end the onboarding period, there'll be some number of sessions as a requirement where they are facilitating the session, but somebody else is there in the room to watch them and give them feedback. And I would note perhaps another bucket we could add on here to be explicit would be, I suggest strongly have them take the sessions. This is another thing too, I'll tell you in the real world, I bet you feel me if you also are a gym owner. I have at times been surprised when I hire someone for my gym. They're sometimes reluctant to take the actual sessions. I just think there's things that you don't understand unless you experience those loads. Far be it for me to get in the way of your, if you're doing 5-3-1, or you have some sort of Russian undulating periodization system, it's very important to you. I don't mean to get in the way of your training, but if this is the soup we're serving, we have to sometimes eat the soup. Finally, let me make this point. Onboarding does not end once they're trained, okay? And I'm gonna give you some quick thoughts here before we move to Q&A about what happens after the onboarding period. But I would note, onboarding phase 1 in my world is what happens before they're on the floor, or if they're not a trainer doing whatever their revenue generating activity is without as much oversight. But I really think of then you have then the clock starts for the 90 days of what I would call onboarding phase 2. Because the first 3 months in the job, I'm going to be ideally auditing them more regularly. So for a typical gym, you might audit your trainers for each service once per month. If they're onboarding, it might be once per week. It might be more than that. For a typical gym, if you have, a part-time trainer, maybe you meet with them twice a quarter, right? If they're a part-time trainer. If it is a new person, you might still need to meet with them weekly. You can decide the pulse. I just want to make the point here. The first 3 months, we're still training. I think that's another common mistake. We sort of get them kind of up to speed. And we're like, relief. Now I can sort of pick up my feet and chill. And that's not the case. The first 3 months, we want to give them more love, care, and attention to continue to support them in getting up to speed. Okay, so this is a resource for you. And I'm going to talk to this quickly just because we're going to give you access to this because Grace asked and she's nice. So we're going to give this to you. So I'm going to give you a templated version that's actually even a little simpler. This one, I admit, is a little bit an eyesore because I want you to see an example of what a task checklist could look like. But one of the pain points I see is when owners are looking to elevate somebody else from, let's say, a full-time trainer that could be on the floor, 25, 30 hours, and that's it, into something of a GM or the hand of the king, right? Where you have the strong number 2. Now, suddenly, maybe they're on the floor, 5, 10, 15 hours, and you want them to do, let's call it, 15, 20, maybe even 30 hours of non on the floor work. And that can be a little bit of a tricky transition. Now, certainly, Grace's slide earlier is important. You need to understand, they get it? Do they want it? Do they have the capacity? But some of the ways that we have to play a role and have the responsibility for making sure they know what winning looks like is turning their job into a checklist. So this is a resource I find very valuable. This is a screenshot when we were onboarding my fitness director at my gym in New Jersey, who, by the way, is incredibly competent. And to be honest, at this point, we don't look at this all the time anymore. But if you are training somebody to come in to do stuff more complicated than just the training piece, and you're finding you get to the end of every day and every week, and you keep noticing they keep not getting around to following up with leads, the hot leads that came in that want to work with you that would help the business grow. For some reason, they just keep not getting around to that thing. Well, you can turn that job, even if it is a bunch of disparate tasks and responsibilities, into essentially a checklist. Now, the most extreme version I would note might be, time blocking their schedule for them. That might actually also be helpful. It just depends on that individual, how well they take to organizational skills. But this is an example you'll see here. This is things broken down by day. So Alana could quite literally just go down by the day. She could track how many outbound calls she did, and it's just done or not done. And provided they're not lying, this becomes very simple for you and for them. It's simple for them because they know what winning looks like. And it's simple for you to inspect what you expect. The next slide you'll see just as a quick example here. You can also do the same thing for weekly tasks and monthly tasks. And my micro pro tip here is if you have a lot of things that somebody needs to do, oftentimes for like a GM, they all line up on Monday. And my suggestion is just make them available on different days. Okay, moving on here. And I'll say very briefly, how we run the one-on-ones really matters. I am a believer that we probably want to have some one-on-one on a regular basis with everybody on your team. And the frequency is going to vary. If you have a GM, it might be every week for an hour in addition to some sort of leadership meeting. If you have, again, a part-time trainer, maybe it's only quarterly if they're super, super part-time. So you decide, but I think everybody on your team needs some dedicated time one-on-one with you, with them. There are a lot of different templates you could use. You'll have the slides after this. You can look in greater detail, but you'll see usually I want to start with wins. I want to look at any metrics or numbers associated with their performance. We want to track, did they do what they said they were going to do? Are the to-dos to done? And then we want to identify, discuss, and solve any issues, right? So any things that come up that can't be taken care of via text message or a quick chat, usually we want to go in the holding pen. And that will particularly matter if you have a GM that's thinking like an owner and you're working on higher level strategy things. You don't want to be blowing up each other's day with lots of God minutes. So putting them in some kind of meeting doc will be helpful. And then you'll see if you're doing team meetings, depending on the size of your gym, you probably need a leadership meeting, even if it's just with you on your own in the very beginning, but you maybe with the GM, you might have some breakouts by department, right? Maybe your training team is meeting together. And I do think some sort of in-person, I'm very old-fashioned, but some sort of in-person full team meeting is important if you can do it. And I know it's hard at part-times. And then finally, you'll see there's some thoughts here for the quarterly review and the annual check-in. And I'll just make the point, these are more robust versions of the one-on-ones that we're thinking a little bit bigger picture, which leads to this next slide here. I think this is the final thing I have to say is I always think there's two kinds of ongoing training. So here's a model I want to give you. This is how I think about this. There's the general development training where I am looking to support their long-term professional growth, supporting for their current role and future roles, just helping them become a gun, right? I want them to become awesome. And this might be things like continuing education assignments happening outside the gym. They might be like general business books, right? Which might not map in need of their current job, but you want to help them understand, things like communication or culture. Could be in services from outside guests on general best practices for training or even perhaps sales if you have a salesperson. Listen, in my career historically, this isn't for everybody, but I've always doubled down on the human. So over the years, I've brought in like meditation teachers and financial experts and anything I can to help them succeed as a human. Separately, but importantly, there's also the training on the standards. So rather than general in-service on something like meditation or bringing in, some fitness expert to train the team, that's all well and good. Again, I'm a big advocate for that. But there's also the constant training on the standards because pros do not practice till they get it right. They practice so they can't get it wrong. Okay. So this would be things like taking quizzes on the SOPs. This would be things like doing role plays on whatever your standard operating procedures are, as well as focused in services. They're just designed to how do we get great at whatever the current systems are for the business.
Perfect. Okay, so just to kind of wrap this all up and before we move on to Q&A here, structural clarity. This is everything that I talked about, accountability chart, every function named and owned, the people analyzer, are the right people in the right seat? That's your foundational work. Combine that with everything Mark talked about, leadership operating systems, the trainer to CEO mindset, invest money to buy time. And then you've got your rhythm as far as your check-ins and your on the quarterly team meetings. All of those things combined are what is going to create careers worth staying in a gym that runs without you. So leadership creates freedom for the owner, and it's about more than just the owner's freedom. This is not going to happen overnight, right? Like you have to build it from the ground up, and that's okay. We've got the templates that we're going to share with you guys to help you along the way, which is great. And like I mentioned, I ran Alchemy on EOS, which is incredible, and I had a really great implementer. But there's also great mentorship groups out there like Business for Unicorns that specialize in supporting gym owners specifically. Mark, do you want to talk just a little bit about what it means to have a mentor to help you support with some of these things?
Yeah, I mean, I'll keep this brief, but like, listen, the reality is like the reason that I also hire outside people is you can't read the nutrition facts on a protein bottle that you're inside of, right? The reality is that all of us have things that we just can't see when we're in. You can't see the system that you're a part of. Grace and I were talking about this. It's funny too, because the thing that's very infuriating, I have to say, some of you, I assume, by dint of you being here, are pretty sophisticated. And what will be infuriating is you can do so much of it on your own, but it's that super valuable, like the last few percent. Sometimes an outside eye can help. So whether it's with a company like Business for Unicorns, there's obviously a lot of people that do what we do. I think it's at least worth considering. And I would note if you're ever interested in finding out more about our particular system, you go to businessforunicorns.com. You can click on work with us and you can read more about the Unicorn Society, or you can go to go.businessforunicorns.com/brainstorm. And that is a free 30-minute call. So if you just want to like hang out sometimes, and like, that's, to be very clear, I know everyone says that this is like sincerely not a sales call, but if you ever want just some outside eyes to take you through some of the audits we do with our clients and just point you in the direction that we think you should focus on next, that's an option for you.
I love it. That's super helpful. Okay, so I did see a couple of questions come in. Mark, one for you
Mhm.
from Steve. I have a lot of volunteers giving up their time. Would you recommend the same approach?
Yes. So, Steve, if the question is, would I approach a lot of this rigor as far as like, how do I find them? What sort of interview process do I do? What sort of training do I do? I think so, and this gets to be one of the tricky things with like a volunteer. And I don't have the specific what you mean by that. I assume when you say volunteer, it's probably some sort of like maybe work study or borrow situation. If that's the case, then yeah, the reality is there's still economic value of you giving them the service. And admittedly, again, I've done this over the years, so I can tell you firsthand. I think what we all know to be true is like it's a little bit of a weird thing because like you're a hybrid client, but you're a hybrid team. But as far as I'm concerned, in most situations, you are best off making the emotional switch for you and for them that you're no longer a client, you're now on the team. Yes, you have sessions, but because we really run into issues when somebody is doing some stuff to help out, but it's not being done particularly well. Of course, the context and nuance of the situation would matter. But in brief, yes, ideally, even if somebody's a volunteer, we're taking them through some of the trainings. There's some clear systems. If they're doing an opening checking checklist, they have a checklist. You're checking that off. There's consequences if they're not doing the things. So that's how I tend to think about that.
Yeah, that's great. And then one additional question. So Greg was saying that he's not getting applicants,
Yes, Greg.
and which
Yes.
can be really, really
Yep.
frustrating. So I know, Mark, you talked a little bit about making sure that you're creating a job listing that's selling itself.
Yeah. Yep.
That the best piece of advice you'd give, or any other like platforms you'd recommend for posting?
Yeah. I mean, I think, yeah, that's certainly one piece. I think the other piece here too, Greg, is if you want to pop on Greg, I'm curious to know, was this a paid Indeed ad? And also, I'm just curious to know what market you're in. The way I think about it is sort of like lead generation for your gym, which is to say there are paid platforms like paid Indeed ad. And Indeed, it's like Meta. It's not going to work organically anymore like it used to. You kind of have to pay, and you will get volume when you pay, and the quality won't be very good, right? But ultimately, if you get sufficient quantity, as the saying goes, quantity has a quality all its own, right? So paid Indeed ads are going to tend to be pretty foundational. However, it's important to appreciate that we want the widest net possible, right? And this is just like marketing. You wouldn't do just a single thing. So I tend to focus on, in addition to sort of paid Indeed ads, you could also, I will often, historically, I've seen, and a lot of clients have seen actually success. If you can find a client, depending on what sort of role you're looking for, particularly if it's part-time, sometimes they are an amazing resource because they already know the culture, they already know how to move. They already know a lot of stuff. So if you just need to get them to cert, and further, you know that they're cool and you want to be around them, people want to be around them. So hiring from clients can help. You can also do an email blast to your clients asking them if they know anybody that they could bring in, maybe even offer some sort of finder's fee. You can talk to your current team to see if they know other people. You ideally develop relationships over time with local strength and conditioning or exercise science programs. You can post on the cert boards. You post on organic social media. So you have to take, unfortunately, in 2026, you have to be everywhere and do all of the things. And typically, and I know this is hard because sometimes we don't have a lot of notice, like New Jersey's an at-will state, right? Sometimes it's just like you just find out right away. Hopefully, if you have good relationships with your trainers, that's maybe like a side note. Ask them, even if you're at will, for like, hey, good faith. I'd love for you to, if you do decide, if and when you ever need to leave, would love at least a few weeks notice to replace somebody. Because the other thing too is I find, you're first looking for the ads. My experience whenever I do this is the first like 2 days. I'm like, oh no, I'm never going to find anybody. No, no, no. But if I can just hang in it for, 7 days, 10 days, 14 days, I'm going to get enough candidates. Oh, Greg mentions these haven't been paid ads. We put it on LinkedIn or social media and the local CrossFitters. Yeah, so local Facebook groups is probably a good idea. I haven't experienced much success with LinkedIn. That's one thing that I'll say. I don't find there's a lot of like any fitness people on there too. Grace, I don't know if you're on there. It's a funny
It,
place.
yeah, it's crickets
Yeah,
for
it's
fitness
yeah,
people,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
for sure.
yeah. I would say like to be honest, like I'm on LinkedIn. I don't even gym owners aren't even on LinkedIn for the most part. It's only like vendor friends and like general business friends. So I would think, Steve, you would get better results running a modest paid ad for a week on Indeed. Again, I have to warn you, you're going to get a lot of not amazing candidates, but I think we just need volume. So I would probably prioritize that over LinkedIn.
Awesome. And then Maria, you threw in the chat just wondering about the task checklist. Yes, we are going to give that to you in sheet form. This is
Mhm.
one of my favorite tools I've ever seen Mark share. When I saw it the first time, I freaked out and was
Yes,
like,
yes,
oh my God, this would be so useful when I was running gyms. So yeah,
yes.
we'll get that to you guys for sure.
Yes, operations is our shared love language. Yes, thank you all for being nerds with us here on this call.
Awesome. I think that's it. Thank you so much, everybody, for sticking around and hanging with us. Really appreciate everyone's time. Mark, thank you for collabing on this. It was really fun. And
Yeah,
thank you
what a
for sharing
pleasure.
your knowledge. Cool.
A
All
true
right.
blast. All right, everybody.